when a poor maid's baby accidentally crawls into the ruthless vampire king's office. The cold monarch finds himself unexpectedly captivated by the fragile human child. What begins as a mistake turns into obsession, as he vows to claim and protect the little one, no matter what it costs the terrified mother, the human kingdom, or his own undead heart. If you had walked into the Night Palace that winter, you would have sworn its heart was made of stone. But this is the story of the night a pair of chubby human hands crawled across that cold floor and cracked the stone open from the inside. The maid was the kind of woman the palace never noticed. Her name was Liana, and she moved like a shadow between the high marble pillars, carrying buckets, washing sheets, and whispering little songs to the baby tied against her back. Her son, Elias, was the only warm thing in her life, a small bundle of soft cheeks and bright blue eyes. She worked in the Vampire King's palace because there was nowhere else a poor human woman could earn enough bread, and because fear, she had discovered, was easier to live with than hunger. The Night Palace was a kingdom of whispers. Servants said the Vampire King, Kale, never smiled. They said his eyes could freeze a man's heart, that one word from him could end a life or save it, and that he mostly chose the first. Liana never looked up when he passed. She only felt the air grow colder and her arms tighten around Elias. In truth, she had never seen his face clearly. That mystery made the fear worse, like a nightmare you can't quite remember after waking. Far above the servant halls, the king sat in his vast office lined with books older than any living human. Candle flames shivered around him, throwing pale light over the carved desk and the tall windows where the night pressed in like a living thing. Kale's long white hair fell in a river over his dark coat, and his red eyes traced the same endless reports: border disputes, trade routes, complaints from frightened humans who still believed he was only a monster. He wore his power like armor, but under it there was a silence that felt almost like emptiness. Centuries of watching people live and die had taught him to close every door in his heart and lock them all. Down below, in the warm, crowded laundry room, Liana untied Elias from the cloth at her back and set him on a folded blanket while she worked. He was just learning to crawl, that fierce and clumsy determination of a child who has no idea the world can hurt him. He patted the floor with his little palms, laughed at the echo, and stared at everything as if it belonged to him. Liana kissed his forehead and whispered, "Stay here, my brave boy. Mama will just wash these and come right back," then turned to the pile of wet linen. Steam hugged the ceiling, and other maids talked softly about nothing important, the way poor people do when they are too tired to dream. No one noticed when the blanket corner bunched up, or when Elias discovered that if he pushed with his feet, he could glide over the smooth stone. Inch by inch, he followed a trail of dancing dust motes toward the half-open door. The corridor beyond called to him with its cool air and strange echo. By the time one of the women laughed loud enough to cover the soft scrape of his hands, the baby was already outside. Elias' world became a long, shining hallway lit by silver lamps. To him it was not forbidden, it was adventure. He crawled past tall windows where moonlight spilled in, painting his small figure with a soft glow. Somewhere above, a clock struck the hour, a deep, hollow sound that made him stop, blink, and then giggle. His giggle bounced off the stone and gave him courage. He turned left at the first corner, then right at the second, following nothing but curiosity and the tiny thrill of freedom. It took Liana less than a minute to notice the empty blanket. That minute shattered her world. Her hands went numb, and the basket of washed sheets fell, soaking her dress. For one terrifying second, she couldn't even scream. Then sound ripped out of her throat, raw, desperate, and the other maids jumped. They understood before she could speak. Every servant knew the rule burned into their minds. Humans were never to enter the upper halls without permission, and nothing was ever allowed near the Vampire King's private rooms. "I'll find him," Liana choked, already running. Her bare feet slapped the cold floor as she burst into the corridor. Elias, baby, answer, Mama." Her voice rang through the halls, thin and trembling. Torches flickered as she passed, and with each empty corner her fear grew heavier. She imagined a dozen horrors. A vampire guard finding him first, a steep stair, a door that opened onto some dark place. Yet still she ran, heart pounding so hard it hurt. High above, in his office, the vampire king paused. His quill hovered over paper as a sound drifted through the thick doors. A distant, echoing laugh, small and bright, followed a moment later by a human woman's cry. He should have ignored it. A king did not leave his desk for every tear in the palace. But the laugh came again, clearer this time, and something in it brushed against a memory he had not touched in 100 years. For a moment the room seemed even emptier. He rose from his chair, the leather creaking softly, and crossed the office in 3 measured steps. Elias had no idea that the heavy black door at the end of the corridor belonged to the most feared being in the kingdom. To him, it was just another barrier to push. He reached it, pressed his tiny palm against the polished wood, and by some small miracle of chance and poorly turned latch, the door opened a slender crack. Candlelight spilled out, golden and inviting. With a proud little noise, the baby squeezed through and vanished into the vampire king's private world. Cale opened his inner door at almost the same moment, drawn by that impossible laugh. The sight that greeted him should not have existed. A tiny human child sitting happily in the middle of his dark carpet, one fist in his mouth, the other reaching curiously toward the hem of the king's long coat. For an instant neither of them moved. The child's heartbeat filled the room like a soft drum, steady and warm. Cale felt the old, dangerous hunger stir, and with it, to his own shock, something else. A strange, aching tenderness, sharp as sunlight in a man who had lived too long in the night. The baby did what no warrior, no noble, no enemy had ever dared. He smiled at the vampire king. Wide, innocent, completely unafraid. A bubble of drool rolled down his chin as he reached both arms up, trusting that the tall, pale stranger would lift him. Cale's throat tightened. No one had looked at him that way in centuries, as though he was not a monster or a monarch, but simply a man who might be kind. His hand moved on its own. He bent, scooped the child up with a care that surprised even him, and felt the small body fit against his chest. Warm, fragile, real. Elias rested his head just below the king's collarbone and sighed with contentment, one tiny hand curling into the fabric of his embroidered coat. Cale stood frozen, the world narrowed to that small weight and the soft, steady sound of breathing. Somewhere deep inside the stone walls of his heart, a locked door creaked. That was when Liana reached the end of the corridor and saw the office door half open. Her knees almost buckled. Terror pushed her forward. She didn't knock. She didn't dare. She simply shoved the door wider and stumbled in, eyes already wet, words tumbling out. "Your Majesty, please, I'm so sorry, my baby." Her voice broke as she looked up and finally saw the vampire king for the first time clearly. Tall and pale as moonlight, eyes burning red, but holding her son as gently as if he were made of glass. Elias was not crying. He was patting the king's chest with sleepy satisfaction, his small fingers pressing over a heart that, by all stories, should not have been there at all. For a long, unbearable heartbeat, no one spoke. Liana's hands shook so much she had to press them together. She was ready to fall to her knees, ready to beg, ready to offer her own life if it would spare her child. Cale looked from the woman's terrified face to the baby in his arms, and something inside him chose a path that would change all of them forever. His grip on the child tightened, just slightly, not in threat, but as if he had already decided he could not let go. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and calm, but filled with a feeling that made Liana's breath catch. "This child," the vampire king said softly, eyes glowing with a strange new light, "has awakened something I thought was dead. And now—" He paused, turning fully toward her, as Elia's tiny hand rested over his silent heart, leaving Liana hanging between hope and horror, waiting to hear exactly what the king would claim next. Liana couldn't breathe. The vampire king's crimson gaze rested on her, on the tears clinging to her lashes, on the hands she had pressed together so hard her knuckles were white. Her son's tiny fingers still clutched the fabric over his chest, as if the baby had decided the cold king belonged to him now. "This child," Cale repeated, his voice quiet but ringing through the room, "has awakened something I thought was dead. And now, I cannot pretend he is just another nameless servant's mistake." Lyanna dropped to her knees so fast they hit the stone with a hollow sound. Pain shot up her legs, but she barely felt it. "Please, your majesty," she whispered, bowing so low her forehead almost touched the floor. "He is all I have. Punish me if you must, take my work, my freedom, even my life, but spare my son. He is innocent. He meant no harm." Her shoulders trembled, yet her voice did not completely break. There was a thin, stubborn strength in it, the courage of someone who had suffered too much to be afraid for herself anymore. Cale studied her as he might have studied a strange, new star, with distance, but also with a curiosity he did not want to admit. He was used to humans who cowered, who flattered, who lied. This one offered herself like a shield in front of her child, even knowing what he was. The scent of her fear filled the room, sharp and metallic, but beneath it there was something softer, love, raw and burning. It reminded him of another love, from a life he had buried so deep he sometimes believed it belonged to someone else. Elias shifted against him with a small, impatient noise, as if annoyed the adults were wasting time. Without warning, the baby reached up and grabbed a silky fistful of the king's long white hair. A single pale strand slipped through his sticky fingers before catching again. Lyanna gasped, expecting fury. Instead, to her astonishment, Cale merely blinked. His lips twitched almost, but not quite, into a smile. Very carefully, as though afraid of startling the child, he loosened the tiny grip and smoothed the hair back into place. "No harm will come to him," Cale said at last. The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water, sending ripples through Lyanna's heart. She raised her head a fraction, searching his face, uncertain she had heard correctly. "You have my word. While he is under my roof, no one will touch him." It should not have been so shocking that a king promised safety to a child. Yet in this palace, where one careless step could cost a life, it felt like a miracle. Lyanna's eyes flooded with new tears, this time of relief so sharp it almost hurt worse than fear. "Thank you," she whispered, the words unsteady. "Thank you, your majesty. I will never let him wander again. I will take him away, and you will not see us again, and—" "You presume much," Cale interrupted, but there was no cruelty in his tone, only a cool, thoughtful weight. "The law of this palace is not so easily bent. A human baby crawled into the vampire king's private office. If I simply send you back downstairs, every noble will know I have grown weak. They will ask what else I am willing to overlook." He looked down at Elias, who had begun patting his chest again, fascinated by the embroidered patterns. "And I find I am not ready to give him up." Before Lyanna could understand what he meant, a sharp knock sounded at the door. The king's eyes flashed. With a flick of his wrist, the latch turned on its own. The heavy door swung inward to reveal Lord Merciless, Cale's oldest advisor, tall and severe in his dark cloak. His gaze swept the room and froze when he saw the human child in his king's arms. For a moment, his composure shattered. "Your Majesty," he breathed, almost choking on the words. "There is a human infant in your—" He caught himself, glanced at Lyanna with thinly veiled disgust, then bowed low. "With respect, this is a grave breach of palace law. If the council hears of this, they will demand the child's removal at once. You know their fears, humans bringing poison, curses, spies. It is dangerous to allow." "What is dangerous," Cale said softly, "is letting rumors rule this palace instead of my will." The candles around them flared at his words, shadows leaping higher along the shelves of ancient books. "You will not speak of this to the council. Not yet. Not until I decide what this child's presence means for us all." Marcellus swallowed, clearly torn between loyalty and terror. "But, sire, if anyone else has seen—" "No one has seen," Cale replied, and his voice had turned to ice. "And if they have, they will forget. You will make sure of it." He stepped forward just enough that even Lyanna felt the pressure of his power, like the air just before a storm. "Tell me, Marcellus, am I king in this palace, or have I become a shadow for the council to move as they please?" The advisor's shoulders sank. He bowed his head. "You are the king, sire, always." His eyes, though, flickered once more to the child, uneasy. "What would you have me say if they ask about the human maid and her son?" Cale looked at Lyanna again, truly looked. She wore a simple, faded dress still damp at the hem, her hair escaping its braid, hands rubbing nervously at the rough fabric of her skirts. There was nothing royal about her, nothing special by the palace's cruel standards, and yet she had run into danger without thinking for love. Very quietly, he said, "You will say that I have taken an interest in them, and that they are not to be touched." Marcellus's eyes widened. "An interest, your majesty." The king's tone did not change. "Yes, this child," he shifted Elia's slightly on his arm, "is now under my personal protection. Consider him," he searched for a word that did not sound like a confession, "a guest of the crown. Anyone who harms him harms me." His gaze sharpened. "Do you understand?" Lord Marcellus bowed so low his forehead nearly brushed the floor. "Perfectly, sire." He backed away, lips pressed tight, and the door closed behind him with a heavy thud that left the room echoing with unspoken consequences. Silence settled again, thick and uncertain. Lyanna pushed herself shakily to her feet, her knees aching. "Your Majesty," she said, struggling to keep her voice respectful when her heart was pounding with new fear. May I hold my son?" It felt wrong to ask, yet Elia's absence in her arms had become a physical ache. Cale hesitated, and the hesitation surprised him more than anyone. Some part of him, dark and ancient, wanted to keep the warm weight against his chest, to listen a little longer to the boy's heartbeat. It soothed a loneliness he had stopped admitting he felt. But he saw Lyanna's outstretched hands, the way they shook not from fear of him, but from the emptiness where her child should be, and something gentler stirred. "Come closer," he said. His tone was still kingly, but softened at the edges. She stepped forward, each pace measured, as if approaching a cliff. When she was near enough that he could smell the faint soap on her skin and the exhaustion beneath it, he carefully transferred Elia's into her arms. The baby made a soft, protesting noise, then recognized the familiar warmth and snuggled against her with a sleepy sigh. Relief rushed through Lyanna so intensely her eyes blurred. She kissed the top of her son's head once, twice, breathing in his milky scent as if to make sure he was real. "Thank you," she murmured again, quieter now, but filled with a deeper gratitude. "I know you did not have to show us mercy. I will never forget this, your majesty." Cale turned away as if unused to such sincerity. He walked to the tall window, staring out at the endless night pressing against the glass. "I did not do it for gratitude," he said, though a part of him wondered if that was entirely true. "I did it because strength without mercy becomes something ugly, and I find I am tired of ugliness." His reflection in the window showed a pale king with a human woman and child behind him, like a ghost of a life he might have once lived. He remembered, unbidden, a little sister's laughter, the way she had run to him with scraped knees, trusting him to make the world right again. She had died centuries ago, long before he became what he was. He had promised himself he would never again care so deeply for anything that could be taken from him. Yet here he was, already thinking of how to protect a child who had crawled into his office by accident. "You cannot return to the servant quarters tonight," he said suddenly, turning back to Lyanna. "There are eyes there I do not trust and tongues too eager to wag. You will stay in the guest chamber adjacent to my rooms." He gestured toward a side door she had not noticed, carved with silver vines. "You will have food, a bed, and a lock only you can open. For now, the safest place in this palace is near me." Lyanna's mouth fell open. "Near you, your majesty, but I am only a maid. People will talk, they will think." "They will think what I tell them to think," Cale said, with a trace of dry humor that startled them both. "Let them whisper. What kind of king fears the gossip of those who fear him? His gaze gentled again. You came here tonight prepared to give up your life for your son. That is courage. Do not let shame steal the place your bravery has earned you. Accept the protection while I still know how to offer it. She clutched Elias a little closer and nodded, humbled. Then I accept your majesty for his sake. Her eyes lifted to his, steady now. But if danger comes, let it come for me first. Promise me that. Cale studied her for a long beat, impressed despite himself. You ask much of a monster, little maid, he murmured. But I will do what I can. He moved toward the side door and placed his hand flat against the silver inlay. The vines glowed softly, unlocking with a faint chime. Cool air drifted out, tinged with lavender and clean linen. Go, rest while you can. Tomorrow will not be simple. Liana stepped toward the doorway, each stride still hesitant but no longer paralyzed. As she crossed the threshold, she turned back once more. The king stood framed in candlelight, his white hair shining, his eyes unreadable. For the first time, she did not see only a figure from terrifying stories. She saw a man who was fighting something inside himself, something that looked suspiciously like kindness. Your Majesty, she said softly, why are you doing this for us? Cale seemed about to reply, then stopped. For a rare moment, the unshakable king looked almost uncertain. He glanced at the place on his chest where the baby's hand had rested, over a heart that no longer beat yet somehow still ached. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because sometimes, he said, the smallest lives remind us what kind of kings we still have a chance to be. Before Liana could answer, a distant bell began to toll somewhere deep in the palace, slow, heavy, urgent. Cale's head snapped toward the sound, the faint color draining from his already pale face. The peaceful night had broken. Footsteps thundered in the far halls, and a murmur like rising wind carried through the stone. That bell, Liana said, tightening her grip on Elias. What does it mean? Cale's eyes darkened, all softness pushed aside by sharp focus. It means someone has discovered something they should not, he replied, and they are calling the council together sooner than I expected. He stepped toward her, the air around him charged with a new, dangerous energy. Stay in that room. Do not open the door for anyone but me. No matter what you hear, no matter who commands you. Do you understand? Liana nodded, her heart racing with fresh fear. Yes, Your Majesty, but what about you? What will you do? Cale reached for the handle of the main door, his jaw set. Candlelight carved his face into something fierce and noble, a king walking toward a battle no one else could see. He looked back over his shoulder just once, red eyes burning with a strange mix of resolve and something almost like hope. I am going, he said quietly, to stand before the council with the truth I have kept hidden for centuries. And then, Maid. His gaze dropped for a heartbeat toward the child in her arms. Then I will find out how far I am willing to go to keep one small human life safe. The door swung open, and the sounds of the alarmed palace flooded in as he stepped through, leaving Liana clutching her son in the doorway of the guest chamber, listening to the echo of that vow and wondering what price the vampire king would have to pay to keep it.